What's on my mind this morning is the issue of the revocation of the U.S. visas of Daryl VAZ and Phillip Paulwell. So that news would have sent shockwaves across the nation last week. Friday morning, the news broke here on Nationwide Radio. During Cliff Hughes Online, we had a conversation with Mr. Vaz on the phone immediately after, confirming it, and Phillip Paulwell confirmed his as well. As a matter of fact, we found out before he did, and then he later confirmed that yes, indeed, this is true. And so a lot of reactions naturally to those announcements, the confirmation that that had been done, one from each political party. And of course, the United States has the right to revoke anyone's visa at any time for whatever reason they deem fit. The right to enter their country, well, I shouldn't even say the right, the ability to enter their country is a privilege. It's not a right. And we all know how difficult it is to get that privilege in the first place. You have to pay a 200 and something US and stand in line at the embassy, brave the elements and all of that for us regular folk. And then in diplomatic circles, I don't think they have to brave the line, but they probably still have to pay the $200 fee, which comes out of the government's coffers if you're a member of parliament traveling for diplomatic reasons. And when they do it to political figures as well, that is, revoke the visa, it's a much bigger deal than if it was done to me, Kalilah, you, Patria K, or any other person, on the street, because it could be but we probably wouldn't even, well, as a journalist, maybe we would question it if it was us.
Yeah.
But for regular folk, it might not, I mean, you'd be upset.
Par for the course.
You'd be upset, but you'd just be like, okay, they had the right to not issue the visa in the first place. When it's a political figure, though, the implications are many, and even more so, the assumptions that come along with that, because one would assume that the U.S. wouldn't take such a measure against a political figure, whether in government or in opposition, lightly, because of the diplomatic insinuations and the diplomatic implications that come along with that. When it's done to a political figure, there's the assumption that there is some type of, that person is involved in some kind of nefarious activity, or something at least that is against the interest of the United States. And that could be the business interest as well. So it could range from cavorting with known or suspected terrorists or drug traffickers to being a drug trafficker or a terrorist. Those, I assume, are the top two on the list. Those are the two that the U.S. is always talking about. You have the AML-CFT, anti-money laundering, financing of terrorism, which is a big deal in the banking industry. And in national security as well, terrorism and drug trafficking are the top two that they're always talking about. And then you have support for communist leaders who are well-known enemies of the United States. And it's that last point that is believed to be responsible for the revocation of Phillip Paulwell's visa. And he, in his statement that he confirmed via WhatsApp to our news center on Friday, he told us about his work in Cuba, that he has been working in telecoms to help them with a system, some type of telecommunications system there, and that he's been traveling back and forth between Jamaica and Cuba for the last 12 months in that regard in order to help them with that system. And we all know that the US's interest in telecommunications is very sensitive. We remember the threats and sanctions that were made against people doing business with China's Huawei, and what happened there. And additionally, the PNP's Cuba links are very well known. It goes back decades, the connections there. As a matter of fact, there's an entire PNP delegation there. I don't know if they're back now, but they were in Cuba and may still be in Cuba, led by none less than the party leader, Dr. Peter Phillips. So I buy that as a legitimate reason, if indeed that is the reason for the revocation of Phillip Paulwell's visa. I can see that being a reason that the U.S. would say, well, we don't want you in our country. Why? So you can come here and forge even stronger and forge more links to help Cuba? No, that's against our interest. I can buy that as a legitimate reason. Now, I was listening to the conversation in Nationwide at 5 on Friday, and I heard Kevin O'Brien Chang saying that this has hurt the PNP more than the JLP, and I disagree with that for several reasons. First of all, well, even before I come to that, politically, revoking the visa of one person from each party has neutralized the political effect. So you can't point fingers and say one is worse than the other, because, well, it happened to you as well. So if you want to make the link and say, oh, you're involved in whatever shadiness, that's why the US took your visa, you have to point the looking glass at yourself as well, because the same thing has happened to you. Now, that's politically. Politicians are in a position where they can't do that now, but we in the public can. And I think the effect is actually worse for the JLP than it is for the PNP, mostly because they're in government. And Daryl VAZ is a government minister in OPM, none less. So he is close to the prime minister. And he says that he will resign if his appeal is unsuccessful. And if that were to happen, that would mean that there would have to be a cabinet reshuffle. And so this one action by the United States would have impacted the entire composition of the Jamaican government. And so that's why I say the implication for the JLP is worse, because it affects the entire running of the country. It leaves Mr. Prime Minister Holness with a hole to fill if it comes to that, if the appeal is unsuccessful. So this would affect the entire Holness administration, the entire government, and the entire nation. So this is huge on that front. And then the second reason I think it affects the JLP more than the PNP is the fact that we don't have a reason for the revocation of VAZ's visa. We have for Paulwell a suspected reason. We don't know if that is indeed the reason. He has proposed those. He has put those forward as possible reasons. We don't have possible reasons from VAZ or from the U.S. Embassy. And the fact that we don't have a reason just leaves the door wide open for speculation. So at least with Paulwell, we have a plausible explanation. We can buy the Cuba thing. And most of us, I assume, have no problem with the PNP's links with Cuba. That's a U.S. issue, U.S. embargo dating back decades and whatnot. But for VAZ now, what could be the reason? So I'm hearing all kinds of wild theories. And if he's unsuccessful in the appeal, he should indeed step down. Not just because it affects his ability to do his job as Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, which requires international travel, but because it taints the entire Holness administration, especially without that public explanation. People will forever be speculating as to the cause. Look how they have this man in cabinet who can't even get visa. You know, the optics of it are very, very bad. And Mr. VAZ has said as much. He knows that. He said that in the interview with Cliff Hughes Online. And he wants to prevent that stain from seeping through the administration, which I think is the right thing to do. But lots more to come from this story. The implications, like I said, are wide and broad, and we keep watching what happens. That's what's on my mind.
My difficulty with all of this?
What's on my mind was brought to you by